Well, President Trump is not backing down from his attacks on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. One day after distancing himself from the "Send Her Back" chant at his rally, this morning he directed his anger at the media, saying they became, quote, crazed over the "Send Her Back" chant. He also accused them of covering, quote, a tiny staged crowd as they greeted foul-mouthed Omar in Minnesota, a state which I will win in 2020 because they can't stand her and her hatred of our country. President Trump lost Minnesota to Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. And yesterday, the president appeared to backtrack and said that he disagreed with the chant. Mr. Trump claimed that he tried to stop it, but at least 13 seconds had lapsed between when the chant started and when he continued speaking. Well, now CBS News has learned that members of the president's immediate family played a role in why he decided to moderate his stance on the chant. Let's bring in Weijia Jiang at the White House and Melanie Zanona in Washington. Weijia is a CBS News White House correspondent. Melanie, a congressional reporter for Politico. So Weijia, in those remarks we just heard a few moments ago, it sounded like the president was praising his supporters at the rally. Can you give us a little more insight as to his thinking at this point?
Well, I think the question that prompted the remarks about the chant is really important. I actually asked the president, you say that you were unhappy with the chant, but the chant was just repeating what you said in your tweet, which is what sparked this entire controversy. Of course, telling the Congresswoman to go back, I asked him, do you regret sending that tweet? And he answered, what I am unhappy with is actually what the Congresswoman said. And he elaborated on, his displeasure about the fact that they can say whatever they want about the country. They clearly are anti-American. And that's what he is unhappy about. So I interrupted and said, so to clarify, you're not unhappy about the chant. And he didn't answer directly, but continued to attack the Congresswoman. So why is this important? It's important because we know he really wasn't sure how to react to the chant. He had to seek the advice of many members of his inner circle, including, as you mentioned, First Lady Melania Trump, as well as his daughter Ivanka Trump, and others about how to react to it. He weighed the pros and cons about moderating his tone because he knows that his supporters might take that as a weakness and his supporters might not like any kind of backtracking. But in the end, he said he was unhappy because politically, I believe that was the only choice. But you're right, just less than 24 hours later, we see him not expressing unhappiness, but doubling down and, in fact, explicitly saying, actually, what I'm unhappy with is what the Congresswomen are doing. And
Weijia, you mentioned a little bit about how the president's family got involved at this point. Do you get a sense, a couple days now after this, do you get a sense as to whether he's going to listen to those voices within his family who are telling him that this is not cool?
Well, he certainly did once already. And remember, the First Lady is an immigrant. Her original country is Slovenia. And so yesterday I asked the president, would you be okay with somebody asking the First Lady to go back to her country? And he did not answer that either. So this is an extremely sensitive subject. You can imagine behind closed doors the conversations going on because the First Lady of the United States has such perspective about this. And so when it comes to something that is so personal to the family, I do believe that he is willing to listen more than maybe in other cases to his family. But we know, even if it's not this issue, he does consult with them very often, with his daughter, with his wife, with his son-in-law. And so this is just in a separate category because it hits home, whether they've addressed it or not. And by the way, they have not spoken. The First Lady has not chimed in on this controversy.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. We have seen the First Lady by his side in several events this week since the chants happened. I'm curious also, Weijia, we saw the president's tweets from this morning. It just seems that he might feel that attacking these four Congresswomen is some sort of an effective strategy somehow.
Sure, and I've spoken to sources with the campaign as well as here at the White House who say they're a gift to President Trump when it comes to 2020, because they are actually involved in a rift with the Democratic Party themselves. We know that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been trying to rein in progressives because she understands how important the moderate vote is, or the undecided vote is in 2020, and she is concerned that, you know, these four progressive freshman Democrats are becoming the face of the party, and she knows that could backfire. And President Trump is capitalizing on that. He sees this as an opportunity to reshape the party in the way he wants to. He has fired off warnings that if a Democrat is elected, the country would become socialist, because these are the leaders that are taking over. He has said there would be a destruction of American values because these four are taking over. So, you know, during midterms, he went after Maxine Waters and sort of used her to define the party. And now we haven't heard him mention that name in months, because he has a new, if you will, quote, gift, according to people close to him.
I want to bring in Melanie Zanona, who was getting mic'd up as we were waiting. Melanie is a congressional reporter for Politico. So, Melanie, I'm curious, what are Republicans on the Hill saying about this back and forth?
Well, Republicans are really struggling with how to respond to this. On the one hand, they don't want to be seen as criticizing the president. A lot of them are still very terrified to cross him and earn a pro-Trump primary challenge. But on the other hand, a lot of them feel like they just can't sit back anymore. They have to condone this rhetoric. So I reported yesterday that a group of GOP leaders, who are normally some of the closest allies that Trump has on Capitol Hill, actually had a meeting with Vice President Pence and asked him to bring up their concerns to the president, which Pence reportedly agreed to do. Now, their main concern here is they don't want this to become a campaign mantra. They would rather focus on the progressive policies of these women. They want to talk about socialism and paint the Democratic Party as socialist, but they do not want to be talking about the personalities, these ugly, nasty, racially motivated attacks. They think will lose them votes, especially when it comes to those moderates and independents who are so critical to winning back the House, to keeping the Senate, and potentially winning the White House. But, you know, it appears that President Trump is not interested in expanding his base of support. It looks like he would rather dig down deep into his current base of support with these types of attacks.
Yeah, there's certainly some sort of a political calculus here, and whether it works for the president. And you mentioning the House is such a good point, Melanie. I do want to switch gears for a second. I want to ask you about Robert Mueller's upcoming testimony in front of the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committee. Do you have a sense, Melanie, of what the line of questioning might be?
Yeah, so we are hearing that there are preparations underway on both sides, Republicans and Democrats. It's very intense. It just shows how high stakes the hearing are. They're doing mock trials with senior aides playing Mueller. Some of them are rereading the Mueller report. Others are looking at congressional testimony that Mueller has given in the past. But what we know is that Democrats on the Judiciary Committee really want to focus on 5 areas of alleged obstruction of justice. That's what they're going to hone in on. Their goal here is to just really bring the Mueller report to life. It's something that they know most Americans and even some members of Congress have not actually read yet. So that's the primary goal here. GOP, on the other side, the Republicans, they're trying to undermine Mueller's testimony. They want to paint him as a sort of political pawn in the Democrats' game, and they want to zero in on the origins of the Russia probe. And the number one question they want to ask is, when did you know that there was no collusion between Trump and the Russians?
You know, Melanie, back in May, Robert Mueller said that the report is his testimony. How do lawmakers plan to get him, get him questions that move him beyond the scope of the report?
Well, the Intelligence Committee, they are going to focus on the Russian interactions, but they might try to get him to go off of his 4 corners of the report. But at the end of the day, Democrats are actually tempering expectations that there's not going to be a major bombshell here. However, they do think just hearing these words alone from Mueller are going to be powerful enough to move the American people and to move some Democrats into this pro-impeachment camp. Because you saw the last time he did speak publicly, it was only for 8 minutes. He didn't say anything new. And just from that, we saw a dozen Democrats jump onto the impeachment bandwagon. So, not a lot of bombshells expected, but it is expected to be must-watch blockbuster television.
And we will be carrying it live. We will be following it minute by minute. Weijia Jiang and Melanie Zanona, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.